Is Traveler's Rest worth your money? Is it just another generic farming sim, or is it actually something special? Is it empty and boring in early access? Or is there enough content to make it feel like a fun, full game? In this video, we'll go through all of these things so you can decide if Traveler's Rest is worth buying for you. And, quick disclaimer, I'll save most of my own personal opinions for the end of the video so you can make a fair decision for yourself how you feel about the current state of the game. And no, this review is not affiliated with the game or sponsored by the developers or publisher in any way, so you don't have to worry about any outside factors influencing my opinion about it. Alright, let's break it down. So if you don't already know, Traveler's Rest is a charming early access game inspired by titles like Graveyard Keeper, Animal Crossing, and Stardew Valley. It's currently being developed by a small indie game studio based out of Barcelona called Isolated Games, and it aims to be a cozy and immersive farming simulation game with the front and center mechanic of tavern management. But is it any good? Let's start breaking down this question by looking at its story, since that's the very first thing you'll see when you start up a new game. In one of its recent major updates, Traveler's Rest introduced a whole new story introduction, making the beginning of the game feel more meaningful and giving you as a player real stakes to run your tavern. Unlike earlier versions of the game where you simply dropped in without any explanation, you now have a clear and compelling goal. Defeat the unbeatable fellowship of tavern keepers and become a legendary figure like Rygar, a famous and beloved tavern keeper who came before you. This goal is made even more compelling by the high stakes involved. You've spent your entire life savings buying, or perhaps getting scammed into purchasing, a very rundown tavern in order to pursue this dream. This new storyline adds a sense of purpose to the game, and the developers have claimed they wish to expand upon this sense of purpose later down the road through their roadmap, when they'll eventually introduce a full main story update. So where does the game's story stand right now? Previously, there was no story whatsoever. And right now, we have an opening story with reason to play. However, the battle with the Fellowship of the Tavern Keepers and further story have not been written in yet. So if you do need an ending in your farming simulation games in order to feel fully satisfied with playing them, you may want to wait until later on in the game's development before you pick it up. But if you just enjoy having some lore to get started, and running a cozy tavern with a heroic goal in the back of your head, you'll feel right at home with playing Traveler's Rest in its current form. Next, let's take a look at the game's tutorial, since it was also added alongside the new story introduction in the recent update. While the tutorial is quite long to play through as far as tutorials go, it does do an excellent job of covering the game's diverse mechanics. With the help of May, a mystical figure who takes the shape of an adorable but feisty ghost cat, you're guided through all the essential tasks you need to know to play Traveler's Rest comfortably. And there is a lot to learn. But the tutorial does simplify it all well, even for inexperienced players, so you can really feel comfortable doing everything from using the starter cooking stations, to arranging tavern decorations, to serving customers, crafting, planting seeds, unlocking new recipes, and much more. However, like I mentioned, the tutorial is rather long, and some players have suggested that the developers should add an option, even for first-time players, to be able to skip it. Thankfully though, once you have completed the tutorial once, you can skip it in any new game you begin in the current version of the early access game. But we'll have to wait and see if the developers choose to add a skip option for completely new players, who would prefer to explore instead of being taught directly. So if you're a player who really hates tutorials, you may want to wait and see if they add that feature in. However, if you don't really mind playing through a longer style tutorial right now, or you even enjoy taking your time chatting with a feisty cute ghost cat while you casually learn the game, you'll be totally fine with how the game is right now. Alright, now that we have the new story stuff out of the way, let's get into the visuals and the art style. Though you might see some longtime players stating that they miss the old medieval-themed charm of Traveler's Rest's original art, the developers have labeled to rework all of the in-game pixel art to be much higher detail and pixel density. So new players coming to the game will be met with an art style, quality, and overall vibe that is very reminiscent of that of Graveyard Keeper and Stardew Valley. While yes, the game did look a little more unique, especially with the customers holding various weapons and looking like visiting medieval adventurers, the art was much lower quality and more inconsistent looking overall. Now everything is much more polished and vibrant, making it far easier for you to distinguish different items and navigate through the in-game menus. And still, the developers have made up for changes to the original charm of the game in some different ways. Even though the style is more modernized now, they've added things such as seasonal events, like last winter's update, where customers came into your tavern dressed up in elf ears, Christmassy clothes, and Santa hats. But if you were in love with the older art style or the medieval theme, this modernization does look like it's here to stay, so it may be a deal breaker for you when it comes to playing. If not, and if you enjoy the art styles and vibes of games like Graveyard Keeper and Stardew Valley, you should feel like the new art puts you right at home and feels very familiar and easy to navigate. Next, let's look at immersion, where Traveler's Rest is at now, and how far it has come since the beginning of its development. What began as a small map limited to just your tavern, where you could only order items by mail from the mailbox outside your front door, has now grown into a fairly fleshed out world with multiple zones, including a couple of grassy areas where you can forage for items, a beach, a small cave where you can unlock new recipes, and a town full of NPCs who sell various supplies. These additions make the game feel dynamic and alive, and leave enough space for you to explore, while also having some areas still blocked off, like the ones surrounded by mine tracks, which seems to have a character trapped frozen in ice inside, which do seem to be teasing new zones coming in future updates, promising even greater exploration coming soon. As for the downsides of this, some original players did like the old mailbox ordering system, since they never had to step foot far from their tavern, and they may feel like having a town full of shopkeeping NPCs might be too similar in vibe to Stardew Valley. So if these things do bother you, they are something to consider. However, having your items sold by lifelike characters who exist on their own schedules and reside in uniquely designed shops, instead of clicking through items sold by a faceless mailbox, may add a more immersive or engaging appeal to some. Especially players who are used to games that have more of a community-style vibe. So although the design choice of adding characters as shopkeepers instead of mail-ordered items through the mailbox may feel like an overused popular mechanic since it's shared by other popular farming simulation games, the characters in Traveler's Rest are still fairly unique in design and dialogue, so the game still should feel fresh enough for new players. I should also note that there are sound effects throughout the game that add immersion to the different actions that you perform, such as fishing sounds, sounds when you pick up crops, and a calming soundtrack of music as you move through the various locations. Now let's talk about systems and progression, because especially in farming sims, progression can often feel either too empty or too grindy. Traveler's Rest, when it first released, didn't really have much in the way of progression, and it leaned heavily toward the empty side of this scale. But throughout recent updates, the developers have greatly expanded the game, taking time to add numerous systems and mechanics, such as unlockable skills and recipes, that give the game a natural and fair progression. Progress feels quick in early game, slows to a moderate pace in mid-game, and then gets more challenging toward the endgame, making the course of the game feel balanced and offer you a natural sense of achievement without becoming a heavy grind. Furthermore, the style of gameplay can change if you desire toward the middle of the game. In the beginning, you'll spend most of your time running your tavern by yourself, but as you progress toward mid-game, you'll unlock the ability to hire staff, which can fully automate your tavern or just allow you to fill a certain role in your tavern if you'd prefer. This can shift the game more toward foraging, being a manager-style player, gardening, or spending your time decorating and customizing the actual appearance of your tavern, allowing you to change up your playstyle if you do feel the game is becoming a bit stale or grindy. But of course, you don't have to hire anyone, and if you enjoy running your tavern solo, you can just continue to do that too. There's a lot of room to make this game play exactly how you want it to, and according to the roadmap laid out on the development team's Trello board, there is still more to come on the way. There are 2 locked skill trees in the menus right now, one for magic and another for social skills. And the roadmap states that in the future we may see combat and social relationship building coming to the game as additional features. So if you play these types of games mainly for combat and relationship building, you might want to wait until these extra systems are implemented before you buy. But if you would feel happy with the other progression I mentioned, the early access version systems might still be a blast for you. And of course, there's multiplayer. Right now, you can play split-screen couch co-op with friends, locally or online through Steam Remote Play. Multiplayer allows players to co-manage the tavern, divide roles, and explore the game together. Right now, even in its current early access state, co-op seems to run playably well, with only a few small bugs and some minor lagginess. Mainly when a tavern is quite large and there are many resources operating at once on screen, or when players are walking into new zones. One downside to the current multiplayer system, though, is that for some players, Steam Remote Play isn't always ideal for online play. But the good news is that the developers are working on adding official online multiplayer, and they have said on Reddit that they are making good progress, and it is expected to enter early beta testing soon. So excitingly, that should come in an update in the near future. With this said, if you plan on playing the game single player or with a friend locally, you will be pretty satisfied with the options available in Traveler's Rest Early Access right now. But if you want to play specifically with friends online, and especially if you haven't had great experience using Steam Remote Play with other games, I would recommend holding off on getting the game right now until after the online multiplayer update comes out. But how is the pricing of the game? You can currently buy Traveler's Rest at full price for $17.99, which is a little higher than Stardew Valley at $14.99 and a bit lower than Graveyard Keeper, which is priced at $19.99. It does go on sale around holidays and various Steam events, though, so if $17.99 seems a little steep, you can always wishlist it and grab it during one of the regular sales. For instance, around Christmas last year in 2024, I purchased a game on Steam for a friend for around just $12 US. Often, to decide if a game's price is fair or not, I like to look at the amount of playtime you could potentially get out of the game for the price spent. If I can get about $1 or $2 of entertainment per hour, I usually consider the game to be a fair price. So with Traveler's Rest at full price, I would expect to get, at best, around 18 hours of playtime out of it, even in its current form. And yes, I have already played it much more than that, and I'd estimate that you could probably barely touch the beginning of endgame after 18 hours. Many other players who have reviewed the game on Steam also have dozens of hours or more of the game played in its current state, with some people logging even hundreds of hours played. When I've checked the community page for Traveler's Rest, I've normally seen over 1,000 players actively playing the game. So I think it's safe to say that as long as you enjoy the game, you can certainly get more than your money's worth out of it in terms of playtime, especially because there's still much more content planned to come throughout the rest of early access. However, it's worth mentioning that if you are interested in the game, it might be better for you to purchase it sooner rather than later. Since the game originally entered early access, it has increased in price a couple of times as more content has been added, so it's likely that we'll see more price increases in the future, especially once it releases from early access as a finished game. Therefore, if you do have interest in it, or you're pretty sure you'll enjoy it, you'll probably get the best deal buying it sooner rather than later. So what are my final thoughts on the game? Personally, I think that Traveler's Rest is one of the most enjoyable farming simulation games I've played in a very long time. And in my opinion, it stands out well on its own from Stardew Valley in a way that a lot of other farming sims don't nowadays. It feels like the multiplayer version of Graveyard Keeper I've always dreamt of, while still having a cozy feel and homey systems that will make any seasoned Stardew Valley player who's looking for something kind of fresh, but also enjoyably familiar, feel right at home. It really strikes a nice balance of feeling deep and content-rich, while still maintaining a laid-back, casual vibe that doesn't feel like it forces you to play entirely around grinding or min-maxing. Once the game is complete, I think it has great potential to actually become one of my top favorite cozy games of all time, especially because I'm such a sucker for chill, indie-style cooking and management games. Even as an early access game, I've been surprised by how well-rounded and engaging Traveler's Rest is so far, and how polished it already feels. Plus, it seems like the developers have really poured their hearts into making this game. Their commitment to improvement, open communication, transparent roadmap, and acceptance of community feedback gives me a lot of hope about the game only getting better and better as time goes on. So whether you're drawn to farming sims, cooking sims, management games, or just looking for a new cozy game to play solo or locally with a loved one, this game strikes an excellent balance of creativity, challenge, and coziness. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video was helpful for you when it came to deciding whether or not to purchase Traveler's Rest. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are about this game if you've played it. Do you like it? Do you think it was worth the money as well? Or do you think it's still lacking as an early access game? If you do think it's lacking, what areas would you like to see improved on as the game continues its development? And if this video was helpful or interesting to you, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening, and stay cozy.